You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, Power Athlete Nation. Welcome back to our three-part series with Dr. Kirk Parsley. This is part 3, where we get into preventative healthcare, or what I like to call optimization of healthcare, where, you're looking at testing, you're looking at what you need to do to live a healthy life, and more importantly, at which point you should start making this fight. For a lot of people in their teens and 20s and even in their early 30s, this is something that could not be farther from their thought process. But as you start to age and you get married and you have kids and you start living this life and maybe you get some bumps and bruises and some aches and aren't performing at the level at which you need, you're going to have to start dialing this thing in and being more proactive. So understanding about testing, what you need to do, and really creating this holistic approach, because as we've got into within this series, nothing exists in a vacuum. There's no system in the body that exists in a vacuum. Everything is interrelated, and you make one tweak here and we see an effect somewhere else. So understanding how all this plays together so that you can optimize your healthcare and, more importantly, make the best decisions. So buckle up for part 3 of our 3-part series with Dr. Kirk Parsley. Thanks for tuning in to our 3rd part with Dr. Kirk Parsley, where we're getting into some of the questions that we field from not only Discord, but what we see floating around. And the next one I would like to hit is preventative healthcare, which is really just a mixed bag term. But I really take it a step further and think about like optimizing healthcare or healthcare optimization, where now you're using things like hormone replacement and a little bit of the biohacking. And even though my whole body kind of like lights up when I use the term biohacking, but there's some real pieces in there. I don't call red light or sauna or, some of the ice baths and what we're doing in terms of testing and that really biohacking. I just look at it as performance healthcare.
Yeah, I mean it's like allostatic loading, right?
What would you define like what's the term that you refer to your service?
So what I tell people I do is optimize performance.
That's what I tell people I do.
Yeah,
I'm performance optimization as well.
So it's like, I don't know how long you're going to live, so I'm not promising you longevity, right? My goal is to make you perform as well as you can possibly perform in whatever metric that you think is important. And I don't care. Like, I don't try to push you one direction or another. It's like, if cognitive is your thing and that's all you care about, then all right, we'll optimize you to be able to perform cognitively at your best. If it's being strong, if it's being fast, if it's being lean, if it's like sexual performance, I don't care. Like, whatever it is. I mean, usually it's a litany of things for guys. It's 3 or 4 things that they want to optimize. And the whole idea is just, if I can make you metabolically and hormonally kind of like on metrics, like on things that I can study and measure and quantify on you, if I can make you look like you're 25 on paper, that's kind of like the male peak. 25 to 30 years old, somewhere in there is like, okay, so you've got the best metabolic milieu you could possibly have. And now let's see what your deficiencies are, right? So that's step 1. So that's lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, sleep, all of that, and hormones. And if you have chronic pain or chronic inflammation, like, we got to control that usually with peptides or something like that. All right, that's the baseline. Okay, now you look like you're this old. I don't know how long you're going to live, but as long as I can keep you to where you have the option of performing, like, you still have to go out and do the work. If you want to be in shape, you still have to go do that. If you want to stay smart, you got to keep challenging your brain, like whatever. It's like, you have to go out and do the work. And so I say, I don't promise I'll add years to your life. I promise I'll add life to your years. You might still die at the same age. You might die 2 years younger. I have no idea. But the highest performance usually means you're moving towards the goals that you want, which is the most satisfaction, which is the most reward of your life. And so that's what we're aiming for. Like, what's the most rewarding way to live your life? You define that, and I help you do that.
So what does that look like, though? I mean, like where do you start with the individual? I mean, obviously with diagnostics, with testing. Yeah. So like, you probably test everything you can test.
Test
from
everything.
Hormones to health, I mean, to cancer, to all the markers. I mean,
genetics,
epigenetics,
gut biome, like whatever. Like, we test,
So you almost get like, here's your book. This is where you're starting.
And so here's a baseline. And out of that baseline, I can't tell you exactly what's ideal, but I can come pretty close. I can say, sleep this way, exercise this way, eat this, take these supplements, take this, get your hormones here. And like, that's pretty close to ideal. But then there's reality somewhere in here, right? It's like I can ramp up and my lifestyle kind of falls off here. I have kids, I have responsibilities, I have travel, my mom had a stroke, whatever, like things get in the way. And then that, we use mitigation tools and techniques and gimmicks and traps and things like that inside of that. But the first thing is just like that generalized basal lifestyle and optimize everything hormonally, and then hormonally and nutritionally, like as far as what I can measure. And then from there we move on to goals. So obviously, when I take NFL guys or I take UFC guys or I take former special forces guys, all right, we have 1,000 brain injuries, so we need to address that. That's part of your hormone dysregulation already, right? So we need to address that. So how are we going to do that? Do you have access to hyperbarics? Do you want to do hyperbarics? Do you have the money for hyperbarics? Do you have the time to do hyperbarics? That's a great tool. I love it. If it's not for you, okay, we're going to do some peptides. Here's.
I keep waiting for us to do a bulk buy on a hyperbaric chamber. I mean, I know it's coming, and I know I'll be the first one you call.
But like you're the only guy with the space that I know. I can't put it at my house. Well, but we're like I'm this close to like 3 chambers.
I know, and I'm gladly we can put them wherever. But like the ability to get in a hyperbaric chamber, I have a couple clients and people I've worked with, high net worth individuals, and one of my recommendations, like the NFL guy Will Fries that I just got done working with, I told him, I'm like, he's. After listening to the podcast, he goes to a place 2 days a week and gets it done. And I was like, if you sign a new contract, I want you to buy one. I want you to have it in your house, and I want you to sleep in it an hour a day. Talking to Dr. Joe and yourself, I mean, the cognitive decline that I could mitigate from the impacts with just one hyperbaric treatment,
right,
doesn't make sense for if you're making millions of dollars a year playing the NFL and you don't have one, it's irresponsible,
right?
And if I could go back in time. I mean, I slept in an altitude chamber. I mean, we did everything. I didn't understand the value of the hyperbaric chamber. And then the other issue, I mean, I just had another guy reach out to me, hey, I'm doing these hyperbaric treats. I don't feel any better. Next question, what hyperbaric chamber are you in? Shows me a picture of a soft-sided one.
Right.
It's fucking bunk.
Right.
And there's no research support that works in any way. It's got to be hard-shelled and get through all these different kind of stuff. Right. So it's just educating the market. But it's like medical grade or pretty close to kind of what they do here where they do the 80%.
Yeah.
But the quality of the chamber. But there's been a few things that I've done cognitively that have just been complete game changers. One was the first time I got dosed with exosomes. Was massively, every time since then, I've noticed no effect like I did the first time. Like that first time, whatever it did cleaned up this inflammation was like somebody gave me the keys.
I remember that. I mean, I remember the change in you, and I remember talking to you about it.
And you being like, you feel like a different, and I'm like, I feel like a different person.
You seem different. Like you seemed a lot different.
It was as if like, you come in, there's cobwebs and you clean the cobwebs and you're like, the room just feels cleaner. And then the other one was after we had Dr. Joe on the podcast, I felt it was disingenuous that I'm having these conversations about, hyperbaric treatments, and I had never had gone through the protocol. So, then the daunting task of like, all right, for the next 8 weeks, 5 days a week, I got to get up and go to it. But I did it. I promised him I would do it. And when I got to 20, it was like a night and day deal. That was another like massive milestone. So I really think those two were huge. And then just some of the other things that we've done, I mean, over the course of time, but those two pieces of the exosomes and the hyperbarics were huge for me.
The hyperbarics has a lot of good effects everywhere, but the brain is huge. And as we age, an aging brain versus a damaged brain is pretty hard to tell the difference between. Really, the only way to tell the difference is autopsy after they die, right? So, of course, like when we have a lot of known brain injuries, then we presumptively treat that. But age-associated neurological decline is very similar symptoms, right? Because if you have, especially if you have diabetes, right, or you have any type of microvascular disease from chronically elevated blood glucose and chronic inflammation, that chronic inflammation in the brain decreases blood flow in the brain because the skull doesn't stretch, right? So the more pressure you put in there, the less the harder it is to get the blood past that.
And,
right?
and then also going back to Dr. Bueller's work, we interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Power Athlete delivers battle-tested performance programming for every kind of athlete. So do you want to go from average Joe to MVP? Then dominate with Field Strong. Get stacked and jacked with Jack Street. Hustle in life and still build muscle with Grindstone. Fear no opponent with Dragon Slayer. Be harder than coffin nails with Hammer. Max out minimal equipment with Lean Enable. Or unlock those newbie gains with Bedrock. Get over to powerathletehq.com/training and choose your 7-day free trial right here, right now. Get lifting, get training, get in shape, all while listening to the rest of this show. From all the constant impacts of the brain, the skull and the fascia ends up binding.
Yeah.
So the fascia gets thick, and then there's calcification in the skull. So the sutures for the skull stop moving.
Yeah.
And so when he does the cranial manipulation and does some of the cranial work, getting the sutures to work again, effectively, when you breathe, the brain is supposed to
release the pressure.
Yeah, it's supposed to relieve pressure, but it actually works like a pump. And then it clears inflammation. It clears fucking junk out of the brain. So when the brain or the skull stops moving due to impacts and the fascia gets thick, and then also the calcification from all the impacts.
Right.
And the skull, once it stops moving, the brain stops cleaning itself.
Right.
And he actually called it like it's like a toilet.
Right.
It gets plugged, and all of a sudden, and that just sits in there and it doesn't clean opposed from coming down. He's the first person I'd ever talked to me about that when he did the cranial.
Is he a DO?
He is.
Yeah. That was all that works from Andrew Taylor, still the original DO.
Yeah.
The cranial sacral manipulations.
Dude, when he did that to me,
Yeah.
it was like it removed a pressure I didn't realize was there. And when he removed it, I was like, it was like wearing have you ever slept under a heavy blanket?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my wife was like, she got these heavy blankets for the dogs, and then she got them for the kids, and so she put it on. At first, she kind of noticed it, and then after I slept underneath it, I didn't notice it in the night, and then when you take it off, you realize oh shit, that thing's kind of heavy.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. When he did the manipulation, I didn't realize the pressure. I sent my NFL kid Will Fries out there. He did the cranial manipulation on him. He said the exact same thing. It relieved a pressure I didn't know I had in my head. This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show.
It's like when that water clears from your ear when you've been in the water all the time, and it's just, you're like, I didn't even know I needed that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And the hyperbarics, decreases that inflammation, the testosterone, you're getting your hormones optimized. One of the good things about having your hormones optimized is that that increases your ability to grow new blood vessels, right? Vascular neogenesis or angioneogenesis, whatever. Hyperbarics enhances that as well. So you get your hormones optimized, you have the ability to grow new blood supply, but why would you? Well, the cells have to signal for it. And if it's chronically inflamed and, like you said, walled off with amyloid plaques, whatever, it's like they're not signaling. But you start getting oxygen to places where you don't have blood supply, and those cells start signaling and the blood vessels start going towards there. And now you're re-engaging regions of your brain. You're getting rid of inflammation, like you said, that's been there for a really long time. You increase stem cells in the brain by 800%. You start growing new neurons. You're increasing neuroplasticity. You increase neurotropic growth factors. And then, of course, what you're talking about, cleansing waste products out of the brain is done with the lymphatic system, which is done during deep sleep. It's only done during deep sleep. So you have to get good quality sleep to clear that out every night. I was going to ask you a question. One of the issues that I've been kind of dealing with personally, I get a ton of REM sleep. Like I'll get a 90, 120 minutes of REM. And my target is always right around 70, 75, 80 minutes of deep sleep. Yeah. And I'll consistently get 50 to 60. So I'm always slightly under the deep sleep, but I get a ton of REM sleep. And when I looked it up and did a little research, people that are intellectually challenged, where they're constantly having to use their brain, tend to need more REM. Yeah. But I still train a bunch. So I wish I was getting more deep sleep. Yeah. Well, I mean, all you can do is sleep is optimize your sleep, right? So it's like,
is there anything I can do to increase deep sleep?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I mean, there's anecdotal evidence about saunas and ice baths and like thermogenic stuff helping. You could experiment with that, but there's nothing reliable on it. It's like, there's a handful of things that you do to optimize your sleep, and once you do that, and you what we call sleep adapt yourself, you sleep, you get to where you're sleeping the same amount every day, roughly at the same time every day, and you're waking up without an alarm clock, and you're falling asleep within 15 to 20 minutes, and you feel refreshed when you wake up. It's like that's the best night's sleep you're going to get. Now these other things we're talking about, like you improve blood supply to your brain, you decrease inflammation in your brain, you improve your hormones. Like the more metabolically healthy you are, the better your sleep's going to be. But I know you're metabolically healthy too. So, yeah. I mean, I think you are where you are, and all of those things are, those are generalizations that stuff shifts over time. And then, the tracking devices are not 100%. They're not 100% accurate anyway. Yeah. So like I more base that on like, hey, do you have normal sleep architecture, right? Are you doing like deep sleep and REM and and then progressively doing more and more REM? And like you said, the more of an analytical cognitive person you are, the more you have to rehearse, right? Because that's what REM is you're rehearsing every single thing that you've thought of and talked about and considered today. You're going to rehearse tonight, and you're going to try to figure out if that's important information or not. And if it's important, you're going to make a more durable pathway to it. And if it's not, you're going to prune it off and get rid of it.
Well, so you dream in REM.
Right. You dream in both technically, but REM is what we think of, like our memorable dreams are usually in REM.
Yeah.
Deep sleep is usually sort of not in color, like less vivid, more kind of emotional, kind of,
I noticed for a long time when I played in the NFL, I didn't really remember or have any memory of dreams. Yeah. Like I remember not dreaming.
Right.
And that was always kind of weird because, as a kid, you have these like amazingly vivid dreams to the point where you get up and I try to like write them down and, you remember a few moments of it. And when I played in the NFL, I remember like being a little concerned. Like they always had a guy to talk to. Yeah. And, I always enjoyed having, I'd much rather sit on a plane and talk to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or somebody than talk to some of the NFL guys I was playing with. Right. So I'd always, talk to one of the docs and we'd shoot the shit about anything. And when I was at the Eagles, one of the docs that they had was a former Army doc. And for his claim to fame was he developed the playlist that they blasted to get Noriega out of his house. Oh. So that was his psychological warfare. Oh. I love talking to this dude. But that was one of the questions I asked him, like, don't dream. And he's like, that's, could be from head trauma. And he went through kind of all this stuff. And one of the side effects that I knew from the hyperbaric chamber and also the exosomes and all the things. And, I also told you that when I went through the Amen study, the part of my brain that was damaged, and then, went through the same deal that Nick Hardwick went with the Brain Research Center. Right. And then saw them 10 years later and like everything had fixed itself. Yeah. One of the side effects from the hyperbaric and some of these other treatments I did was I noticed that I found myself having much more vivid dreams like I did when I was younger. Yeah. And I kind of marked that as like a sense that like maybe I'd fix some of the shit that I'd fucked up.
Right. Definitely. It's unquestionably true.
So if somebody's looking to optimize and really just like, because people don't know where to start. I think, getting some genetic stuff done, I think getting the gut biome tested, getting stool samples done, and also, cancer and tumor markers is extremely important. Like one of the tests that we ran with Kate, when she found out that she was actually positive for breast cancer, we ran a blood test that we didn't tell them she had cancer. We just ran the blood test for cancer markers, and she came back negative. And I came back negative, which was nice. But that was a good indicator for as the tumor or the cancer grows in the breast, it's kind of contained within the sac. Right. And I guess the reason that breast cancer is so deadly is that women don't notice it because they don't have any issues. And then it breaks through and now all of a sudden it's stage 4 and they're in the fight of a life. Right. Yeah. So we got into all this cancer stuff and there's real ways, but I always wonder how accurate they are and do people need to do this and to what level is this really important?
I mean, if my patients are passionate about it, I'll do it. Kind of the number one rule of medicine is you don't test anything that you can't do anything about, right? If you don't have a solution, why test it? So there are a very few levers that you can move depending on certain factors. something like putting somebody on a ketogenic diet and putting them in a hyperbaric chamber for 2 months and then retesting them. Like, I don't have a whole lot. I don't have a whole lot of solutions. And then the other thing is that cancer, like we all have cancer, and then it goes away. Like our immune system's fighting it, right? So I'm an avid believer in the mitochondrial dysfunction idea, postulated for cancer theory. That makes the most sense to me. Just like stress hormones make way more sense for heart attacks than lipids. Like the cholesterol theory makes no damn sense whatsoever. And they keep ramming that down our throats. So I think the mitochondrial dysfunction is probably the primary cause for cancers. And so anything you can do to optimize that, and again, it's hyperbaric, it's exercise, it's hormones, it's decreasing stress hormones. There's peptides that increase mitochondrial density, obviously aerobic work. So all of that stuff, just keep, again, we're enhancing your function towards your goal, right? And your goal is to not have cancer if you have cancer markers.
If you're a man, roughly 90% of all men are going to die from one of two things. It's either cancer or you're going to have a heart attack.
Right.
You get in a sauna 5 days a week. You do aerobic work 5 days a week. I mean, your chance goes down to 0 based upon studies out of Finland with the sauna work. So I mean, we can manage the heart issues.
So here's something I just learned you might find interesting. So sauna, as you just alluded to, is a Finnish word. It's the only Finnish word in the English language. And sauna actually means getting hot and then cold plunging. I think getting hot and cold plunging.
Because it's cold in Finland.
Yeah, so they set their saunas outside and then they get overheated and then they go sit in the stream or whatever.
Yeah, or in the snow.
They go sit out in the snow or whatever. They get cold and then they get back in. When I was at that Ford research review, we were planning research for next year, and one of the guys brought that up and he's like, they never considered separating the two. Like they always do both of them. So now a lot of the research is, they're testing both ends of them.
When we were kids, my parents bought a place in Mammoth, and so we would drive up and go skiing 10 weekends a year, which was fucking epic. It was like every other weekend we'd go up during ski season. Now it's cool because my brothers and I own the place, but they had a big kind of wet sauna, and so after we get done skiing, we'd go in, and before my mom would cook dinner, we'd go over and we would get in the sauna and we'd sit in there until you couldn't sit anymore, and then we'd go outside and either jump in the ice cold pool or we'd roll around in the snow, and then we'd go back and forth. And it was amazing when we would do that how much better we felt. Now all of a sudden we're kids, we're 10, 12 years old, so we're like rubber. But we would go and we would eat and then instantly fall asleep, and then we'd wake up feeling like the best you've ever felt in your life. So it was always weird to not to get in there, and you just get in there until you couldn't handle it anymore, and you go outside and you go jump in the pool. And then we'd play games, and people thought we were crazy because you're out there and this pool's 30 some degrees. You got to break the ice to get in and out. And it was just a good show. But I mean, we also grew up surfing in Southern California where it was 58, 60 degrees, and you're wearing a t-shirt, tank top rash guard. One of the researchers that was presenting was from Lithuania, and all of his cold data was 56 degree water, and he kept them in there for 3 hours or until their core temperature hit 95 degrees. And I was like, wow, that's a rigorous program. Well, and he compared it to the much colder, but he didn't go. I think his colder was 40. There was that deal where those NFL players capsized in that boat in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I think they were in 72 degree water, and they all died of hypothermia. So I've always been kind of fascinated by 72 degree water can lower your core temperature if you're in there long enough.
90 degree will kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, you get your core temperature down to 90 degrees, you die. I mean, 95 is the lowest ethically you can go. Like an IRB is not going to.
So for you guys in the SEAL teams, I mean, you guys were doing a ton of deep water dives. I mean,
I think that's why ice baths don't really affect me. There's some neurological adjustment. and
you're so broken.
Yeah, I was really a little self-conscious about it because they gave me that ice bath and I sat in it and I was like, what are we doing here? I got out after 5 minutes because they said, I think I did 6 minutes or something. I did 5 or 6 minutes. I got out. I'm like, what was that supposed to do? Like and I just kept sitting in it longer and longer. And Brandy gets nervous and like she's working out going, how long you been there? How long you been there? And I like sitting in there watching podcasts and stuff. And like, but yeah, we did, we did our combat swimmer courses in Bangor, Washington. So the water temperature of death was about 37 degrees. And there were 2.5 hour dives, 2 to 3 dives a day, 7 days a week, 8 weeks. You did that a couple of times a year, So I think,
so you're cold adapted.
Yeah. At this it's interesting at this research symposium I just went to, they showed an adaptation. If you go in 6 days in a row, like your cortisol and your epinephrine, norepinephrine, like all your stress hormones spike like crazy when you first get in your first cold bath. And then after 6 days, you kind of adapt and they plateau. They only go up about 20% and they stay there. And then like some reason, day 12 kind of spikes up again. You come back down, and they did this with 40 degree water, and they did this with the 56 degree water. And then interestingly enough, brought people back like 2 weeks after finishing their cold plunge research. And they had really high epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And he didn't speak English well enough for me to.
So is there a positive effect?
Well, we don't know. Like the cold data is messy, but the point of it was that you definitely adapt. And so when I went there, I was already concerned about like, how am I going to do research? And it's like, will research on me be different? Because I'm the only guy I know like that. Like I have others.
No, I'm cold adapted too, because
I've SEAL buddies who get in there and they shiver and shake they're crazy. It's 6 minutes they gotta go.
I have no shiver response.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I was getting in my pool every night. We had Kristen on the podcast, who's kind of like, she's a biohacker, and she came out and has done all these cold plunges for us when I were at the events. So she said to me, she's like, you have to shiver. So I would get in my pool in the dead of winter, and then I would get out and I would stand in the wind for like till I was dry, and zero shiver. And so she didn't believe me. So we came out, we did these cold plunges, and I was standing there, and she's like, you have no shiver response. You're broken. And I was like, I just think I'm cold adapted. I mean, we grew up surfing in, cold water, and like, every day in the NFL, we got in cold tubs, and it just doesn't really affect me the same way.
Yeah. I don't feel cold. Like I watched.
I feel it in my hands.
Yeah, I was going to say I do feel it in my hands.
If I can keep my hands out, I can sit there forever. If you put my hands in, something is. I don't know what it is about my hands.
It hurts my hands.
Yeah, because I think it's from using these as weapons that there's maybe some weird.
But if I do it two or three days in a row, then it quits hurting my hands.
Okay.
But that was the only thing I noticed. Like when I put my hands in, like shit, that burns.
Yeah, I mean, like my fingers hurt, and I'm like, oh, I don't want this.
Like 3 to 5 minutes for that to kind of go away. And I do lose a little dexterity in my hands after a long time in there, but everything else, like it doesn't matter if I stay in for 5 minutes or 45 minutes. I feel the same when I get out. So I'm glad you're like that too, because it'll be interesting to do research and have somebody else who's like me.
Yeah. All right. Well, so for people that are kind of looking for this optimization thing, I mean, the idea that, there's testing, there's food, there's sleep. I mean, it's not just one thing. And I think where people have kind of gotten a little off the rails, especially, with social media, is everybody's kind of focused on like these siloed things where everything's living, existing in a vacuum. You need to eat carnivore. Right. And you're like, well, why do I have to eat carnivore? Right. And everything is so extreme, and people kind of fit within these camps. But it really feels that it's like the spectrum. Like, are you eating well? Are you exercising? Are you keeping your body fat in check? Are you sleeping well? Are you optimizing your hormones? Like, are you taking supplements when you're micronutrient deficient? Right. Are you getting testing enough to be able to know what this is happening? So it feels like to be a healthy individual, you have to be proactive. And when you're young, you're just healthy because you're young. Right. But as you age, that the level of dedication and really just like fine tuning this has to go up. Yeah. So for individuals, I mean, like, like I feel like too, the sooner you start this fight, the better you are. Yeah. I mean, that's a good way of saying it. So kind of as you become aware of lifestyle factors that matter, you start optimizing them then, right? And hopefully by the time you're
35, you've gotten things pretty tight and you know what to do. But lifestyle is the foundation of all of it. I think, whether you want, like, there's a few tricks, right? Like hyperbarics, I think, is a trick that doesn't exist anywhere in nature, but it's super physiologic oxygenation. It's allowing your mitochondria to operate at a rate higher than they could ever do. It's a performance enhancing device, right? It's just like it's like performance enhancing drugs or something. Like that's super physiologic. You can't hit that without the hyperbaric chamber. So that's I guess if you want to use that stupid word hack, that would be the hack, right? Almost everything else is just hormetic stressors. It's right. It's an allostatic load outside of your comfort zone, and like get a little hot, and then let your body recover. Get a little cold, let your body recover. Right. You just keep moving further and further from baseline, and it's a stretch. Like how do you get stronger? Right. You do more work than your muscles are capable of doing, and when you go to sleep, if all your anabolic stuff's in order, then you'll repair those muscle fibers to be stronger for the next time you do that. So the next time you do it, you're a little bit stronger. Yeah. And then you do that every day. So it's like, how do you get heat adapted? Well, go into hot, staying hot as long as you can and then recover. The difference between like a workout and an injury is whether or not you recover, right? It's like, how far did you stress yourself? Were you able to recover before you wanted to work out again? No, you injured yourself, right? Like you went a little too far. So I think all of it's like that. I think the fasting is that. I think the cold plunge is that. The sauna is that. The endurance activity, strength training is like, it's all getting away from this hormetic set point of, sitting on your couch and doing nothing. You have no resiliency. Like, the slightest thing happens and you die because like your body can't recover from anything. Yeah. But the broader you can make, the acceptable range of your physiology to where it's seen that, it's been adapted to that. Like we're talking about being cold adapted. I get in a cold plunge, I come right back like no problem, right? Saunas I'm not so great at. There's no correlation between those two actually. I thought, well, maybe because I'm cold adapted, like, it should help me with sauna. I was like, no, it doesn't help it. Nothing.
All that happens if you get in the cold ahead of time, at least it just takes longer to warm up, and exactly. You're like, you're fine. I can stay in here longer.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you see these other guys that are like having to wear the hats and the whole thing, and I'm like, dude, I don't need that. Dude, I fucking overheat like this.
Yeah. The interesting thing is the hats actually keep you from overheating.
Oh, because you're losing all the stuff through your head.
Yeah. Well, so it doesn't overheat your head.
My claim to fame is I played in the hottest game in NFL history.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's at the time I've heard they told us it was like 175 degrees on the field. We heard 163, 168. Wow. It was September 1st, noon, Dallas, on the old Dallas Stadium where the roof was cut out and the turf was heated up, and we were out there and it was awful. Yeah. But I made it through, and it was terrible. I mean, people were overheating. They told us if you lay down, you die. Yeah. And it was awful. And they didn't think of canceling the game. We still went out and played it. And
that was 2 days in Katy, Texas, when I grew up. Man, dude, 115 degrees.
I did the same
all
thing.
The time. Like,
the NFL kid. I was talking about Will Fries. I mean, they go 5 padded practices in training camp. Yeah. They don't do any. I mean, like I could have played 20 years. Based upon the practice schedule that he was giving me. And I think like the thing that we kind of came to is he's like, to play the game when you played, and like these guys before, your level of durability and toughness had to be so fucking high that he's like, I was like, the only difference is you're adapted to what you do. You could have adapted to what we did. You just weren't put under that stress.
Right.
So this idea of these guys couldn't play. So I just think people adapt to the stress you put on them.
Right.
But if they don't put this stress in there, they don't adapt. So it's kind of like a chicken or egg deal.
It's up to the elders to teach them that they need to do that.
Yeah, which is why he comes and trains with me, which is fun. Yeah. Well, Doc, this has been great, man. Yeah. I thank you so much for taking the time. And this concludes our 3-part series. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys want to see more about Doc Parsley, you can find him. If you want to understand a little bit more about the sleep remedy, I recommend you get on it. And thanks for tuning in. Another episode of Power Athlete Radio. See you. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by kofi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.